It was shocking news for Pastor David Jeremiah's followers when rumors started circulating that he had been sentenced to life in prison. Pastor David Jeremiah, known for his inspiring sermons and deep, thoughtful teachings, suddenly found himself facing serious legal troubles. Something no one could have predicted. For years, Pastor Jeremiah captivated audiences with his powerful messages and leadership within the church. But now, his flourishing ministry has taken a dark and unexpected turn. What exactly did he do to deserve such a severe sentence? Stay with us as we explore the events that led to this dramatic shift in Pastor David Jeremiah's life and the details of this astonishing case. Rumors surrounding the conviction, shocking details exposed by his colleagues. The rumors surrounding Pastor David Jeremiah's conviction have stunned his followers and the Christian community at large. For years, he was seen as a model of integrity and faith, a respected leader in the church whose messages touched millions. But suddenly, whispers started to emerge from within his own circle, revealing shocking details that no one could have expected. His colleagues, those who had worked closely with him in ministry, began to expose information that painted a very different picture of the man many had revered. It all started when some of Pastor Jeremiah's closest associates began to speak out. These individuals, some of whom had been with him for years, quietly started to make claims about his actions behind the scenes. The rumors quickly spread, with each new revelation adding more fuel to the fire. At first, the details seemed vague and unsubstantiated, but as more colleagues began to share their stories, the accusations grew more serious. Some claimed that there were financial irregularities within the ministry, that funds intended for charitable purposes were being misused. Others spoke about questionable decisions being made in private meetings, suggesting that the ministry had become more about personal gain and less about spreading the gospel. The more these colleagues came forward, the more the public began to question the once unshakable image of Pastor David Jeremiah. How much of what they had seen in his ministry was genuine, and how much was carefully crafted for public consumption. As the details of his behavior came to light, it became clear that something had been happening behind closed doors that contradicted the persona of the man who had inspired so many. Was it possible that Pastor Jeremiah had been living a double life, one that included hidden secrets and unethical actions? The rumors grew stronger as people began to speculate about what these shocking details meant for Pastor Jeremiah's future. Was he guilty of the accusations? Or were they simply the result of disgruntled colleagues trying to tarnish his reputation? As the investigation deepened, more and more questions arose. The rumors had turned into a full-blown scandal, and the Christian community found itself divided, unsure of who to trust or what the truth really was. The shocking details exposed by his colleagues had left a once respected leader's reputation hanging in the balance. What exactly was he accused of? Pastor David Jeremiah's once pristine reputation, built on decades of service and a message of hope, began to unravel when he was accused of a series of serious allegations that no one could have predicted. For years, Pastor Jeremiah had been seen as one of the most respected figures in the Christian community. His teachings had inspired countless individuals, and his ministry had been one of the largest, most successful Christian broadcasting operations in the country. But behind the scenes, things were not as perfect as they appeared. The accusations against him were grave and shook the foundation of his ministry, causing many to question everything they had once believed about him. The first accusations that surfaced were related to financial misconduct. Whispers began to circulate that funds raised by his ministry, which were supposed to be used for charitable causes, had been mismanaged or diverted for personal use. His critics alleged that he had used ministry money to fund a lavish lifestyle, including expensive travel, personal gifts, and properties that had no connection to his work. Some claimed that they had seen money from donations being funneled into accounts and assets that were not related to the ministry's mission, raising concerns about the transparency of the financial operations within the organization. A former associate of the ministry, who had worked closely with Pastor Jeremiah for several years, came forward with accusations that the financial dealings within the ministry were far from transparent. According to this individual, there were times when large sums of money went unaccounted for, and there was no clear explanation as to where the donations had gone. The insider claimed that Pastor Jeremiah was often involved in these financial decisions, and that his lifestyle, which appeared to be much more extravagant than what a typical religious leader might maintain, was funded by these questionable financial practices. This individual even suggested that Pastor Jeremiah might have been aware of the financial discrepancies, but had chosen to ignore them in favor of maintaining his status and personal wealth. As these financial accusations gained traction, more disturbing claims emerged. Some began to speculate about Pastor Jeremiah's personal life. Whispers of extramarital affairs and inappropriate relationships with members of his ministry staff began to surface. While these allegations were never fully substantiated, they added another layer of complexity to the already mounting concerns about his conduct. Rumors began circulating that his personal relationships had become entangled with his professional ones, leading to accusations of misconduct and a lack of professionalism in the ministry's leadership. Additionally, there were claims of manipulation and abuse of power within the ministry. Some former employees and close colleagues alleged that Pastor Jeremiah had used his position of influence to control people's actions and decisions, both within the ministry and outside of it. According to these sources, there were instances where Pastor Jeremiah would use his authority to coerce staff members into following his personal wishes, even when those wishes were not aligned with the ministry's stated values. This led to accusations of an unhealthy power dynamic within the ministry, with some claiming that Pastor Jeremiah had created an environment of fear and intimidation. One of the most serious accusations came from a former close associate, who claimed that Pastor Jeremiah had engaged in unethical business practices involving his ministry's assets. This individual alleged that Pastor Jeremiah had used his position to make investments and secure deals that would benefit him personally, even at the expense of the ministry's mission. According to the accuser, these investments were often risky, and some resulted in financial losses that were never fully disclosed to the public or the ministry's supporters. As more of these allegations surfaced, Pastor Jeremiah's critics began to question the very foundation of his ministry. His supporters, who had once looked up to him as a spiritual leader and a model of integrity, were left wondering how they could reconcile these claims with the man they thought they knew. How could someone who had spent so many years preaching about honesty, integrity, and the importance of living a life dedicated to God be involved in such actions? Pastor Jeremiah responded to these accusations by vehemently denying any wrongdoing. He maintained that he had always acted in good faith and had used the resources entrusted to him by his followers to further the work of the ministry. He argued that the allegations were baseless and part of a concerted effort to discredit him and his work. In public statements, Pastor Jeremiah expressed his belief that the accusations were motivated by jealousy and bitterness from former associates who had personal grievances with him or the ministry. Despite his denial, however, the public perception of him began to shift. People who had once trusted him began to question his actions, and the ministry's supporters began to feel uneasy about continuing their support. The media, eager to capitalize on the story, began to dig deeper into the allegations. Investigative reports uncovered evidence of questionable financial transactions, and the media's portrayal of Pastor Jeremiah began to shift from one of reverence to one of suspicion. The scandal became a major news story, with many outlets covering the ongoing developments and providing a platform for both his critics and supporters. Public opinion became divided. Some continued to defend Pastor Jeremiah, believing that he had been unjustly targeted, while others saw the accusations as proof that the man who had built a vast ministry empire was not the righteous leader he appeared to be. One of the most disturbing aspects of the accusations was the idea that Pastor Jeremiah had exploited his position of authority for personal gain. This accusation raised serious ethical questions about the integrity of religious leaders and the potential for abuse of power within religious organizations. The public began to question whether the world of televangelism was as transparent and accountable as it claimed to be. For many, the scandal surrounding Pastor Jeremiah was just another example of the corruption that could fester within powerful religious institutions. As the investigation into the allegations continued, Pastor Jeremiah's ministry began to suffer. Donations, which had once flowed freely, began to dry up as supporters became disillusioned by the scandal. Some followers even left the ministry altogether, unable to reconcile their faith with the tarnished image of their leader. The public fallout from the accusations put the future of the ministry in jeopardy, and Pastor Jeremiah found himself in a position where his credibility was severely compromised. Despite the growing scandal, Pastor Jeremiah's supporters continued to stand by him. They argued that the accusations were just a smear campaign designed to tear down a man who had dedicated his life to preaching the gospel. They pointed to his decades of service and the lives he had touched as evidence of his true character. These supporters continued to defend him, believing that the accusations were the result of misunderstanding or malicious intent. However, even among his supporters there were doubts. Some began to question whether Pastor Jeremiah had truly lived up to the standards he had preached for so many years. Could someone who had led such a successful ministry be so deeply involved in unethical behavior? The accusations were so severe that they left a cloud of uncertainty hanging over his future. Pastor Jeremiah's ministry was no longer seen as untouchable, and his legacy as a leader was now in question. The situation remained fluid, with ongoing investigations and developments. What exactly Pastor Jeremiah was accused of, whether it was financial misconduct, abuse of power, or unethical business dealings, had yet to be fully uncovered. What was clear, however, was that the scandal had already had a profound impact on his life and ministry. Whether he would be able to recover from these accusations, or whether they would mark the end of his ministry, remained to be seen. For now, the future of Pastor David Jeremiah was uncertain, and the accusations against him would continue to haunt him for the foreseeable future. What could he face? Pastor David Jeremiah's situation, with all the allegations swirling around him, has led many to wonder what consequences he might face if the accusations turn out to be true. For someone who built an empire based on his reputation as a man of faith, honesty, and integrity, the potential fallout could be devastating. The rumors about financial misconduct, misuse of ministry funds, and potential personal scandals have shaken the very foundation of his ministry and his public persona. If the allegations are substantiated, Pastor Jeremiah could face serious consequences, both legally and personally, that could alter the course of his life and ministry. The most immediate consequence he could face is legal action. If the allegations of financial mismanagement and embezzlement are proven to be true, Pastor Jeremiah could find himself facing charges that carry serious legal repercussions. The accusations about diverting ministry funds for personal use are not something that can be easily dismissed, especially in the public eye. Legal experts suggest that if investigations reveal clear evidence of financial fraud or abuse, he could face criminal charges. These charges could range from fraud and embezzlement to money laundering, depending on the nature of the financial transactions involved. If Pastor Jeremiah is found guilty of any of these charges, he could face a lengthy prison sentence. Financial fraud is taken very seriously in the legal system, especially when it involves large sums of money and organizations that are meant to serve the public good. In this case, the money that was supposedly donated to support charitable causes and further the work of the ministry would have been misappropriated for personal gain, a crime that could carry heavy penalties. Depending on the severity of the offense and the amount of money involved, Pastor Jeremiah could face several years in prison, not to mention the long-term impact on his personal and professional life. In addition to the legal consequences, there's also the very real possibility of financial penalties. If convicted, Pastor Jeremiah could be required to pay restitution to those who were affected by his actions. This could include the followers who donated money under the assumption that it was going toward the ministry's work, or the charitable causes they believed they were supporting. The amount of restitution could be substantial, potentially in the millions of dollars, depending on the amount of money that was misappropriated. On top of that, there would likely be fines imposed by the court, further adding to the financial strain he could face. The loss of his public position would be another devastating consequence. Pastor Jeremiah has spent decades building a reputation as a leader in the Christian community. He has inspired millions with his messages of hope, faith, and integrity. But if the accusations against him are proven true, that reputation could be permanently tarnished. The trust and admiration that his followers once had for him could be lost forever. His ability to lead a congregation, speak at public events, and continue his work as a spiritual leader would be severely compromised. If the public loses faith in him, it's likely that his ministry could suffer as well. Donations, which have always been a crucial part of supporting the ministry, could dry up as followers pull their financial support. The ministry, once thriving and widely respected, could see a decline in membership, financial backing, and influence. His name, once synonymous with trust and leadership in the Christian community, could become a symbol of scandal and betrayal. The future of his ministry would be uncertain, and the brand he had worked so hard to build could crumble. For Pastor Jeremiah, the emotional and psychological toll of the situation would be immense. The accusations, coupled with the public scrutiny and legal battles, would likely take a significant emotional toll. Having spent most of his life in the public eye, being faced with such an overwhelming amount of negativity could lead to feelings of isolation, shame, and regret. The stress of defending himself against the accusations, whether in the courts or in the court of public opinion, could lead to severe mental and emotional strain. The person who was once admired for his spiritual strength and calm demeanor would now be forced to confront the consequences of his actions in a very public way. If the accusations involve personal scandals, such as affairs or inappropriate relationships within the ministry, the damage to his personal life could be just as severe. Pastor Jeremiah's relationship with his family could be tested to its limits. His wife, children, and close family members could be drawn into the media frenzy, with their personal lives exposed to the public. The emotional strain on these relationships could be immense, and it's possible that his family could face pressure to distance themselves from him, especially if the scandal continues to escalate. The shame and humiliation of having their private lives and decisions made public could create rifts that are difficult to repair. Rebuilding his life after such a scandal would be a monumental challenge. If Pastor Jeremiah chooses to fight the allegations and clear his name, it could take years of legal battles and public relations efforts to restore his reputation. However, even with a strong defense, it's unlikely that he would be able to return to the position of trust and influence he once held. The damage to his personal brand and ministry could be permanent. Many of his followers might never return, and those who choose to stay would likely do so with skepticism, questioning every action and decision moving forward. On the other hand, if Pastor Jeremiah chooses to step down from his role within the ministry and withdraw from the public eye, he may be able to begin the process of healing and rebuilding his personal life. Stepping away from the ministry could allow him to focus on personal growth and repairing his relationships with his family. It could also give him the space to deal with the emotional fallout of the situation without the pressure of constantly defending himself in the public eye. However, this route could also be seen as admitting guilt or conceding that he could no longer continue in the role that had defined his life's work. The psychological burden of making such a decision could be just as heavy as dealing with the accusations themselves. In the worst-case scenario, if Pastor Jeremiah is convicted and sentenced to prison, his life would be fundamentally altered. The impact of a prison sentence would not just affect him, but his family, his ministry, and all those who had relied on him for guidance and leadership. His time in prison would not only strip him of his position and influence, but also leave him with a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. The stigma of being convicted of such serious crimes could make it almost impossible for him to regain his former stature, even if he were to eventually be released and attempt to rebuild his life. As Pastor Jeremiah navigates this turbulent period, he faces an uncertain future. The consequences of his actions, whether legal, financial, or personal, could change the course of his life permanently. His once promising career could be over, and he may be forced to confront the reality of living with the fallout from his decisions. How he responds to the allegations, whether he fights to clear his name or takes steps to move away from public life, will determine his future. One thing is clear. The road ahead for Pastor David Jeremiah will be difficult, and the consequences of the accusations will shape the rest of his life. What's next for him? What's next for Pastor David Jeremiah? That's the question everyone in the Christian community is asking after the shocking allegations surfaced about his personal and professional life. Once regarded as a leading figure in the evangelical world, his life and career now hang in the balance as rumors swirl about financial mismanagement, personal misconduct, and a betrayal of the trust his followers placed in him. The situation is complicated and fraught with uncertainty, with many wondering what the next chapter of his life will look like. Will he be able to recover from the scandal, or is this the end of the road for him and his ministry? Only time will tell, but there are several possibilities for what could happen next. One likely scenario is that Pastor Jeremiah will face a lengthy legal battle. The accusations against him are serious. Allegations of financial fraud, misuse of ministry funds, and perhaps even personal misconduct. If the investigation continues to uncover evidence of wrongdoing, he could find himself in court, fighting to clear his name. Depending on how the case unfolds, this could result in either a long and drawn-out legal process or a swift resolution. In either case, the stress and public scrutiny would likely take a toll on him personally. Being in the public eye for so long, Pastor Jeremiah is used to facing criticism, but this situation is different. The stakes are much higher, and the consequences more severe. If the legal battle does not go in his favor, Pastor Jeremiah could face criminal charges, including potential fines or even jail time. Financial misconduct and fraud can carry hefty penalties, and for someone in his position, the consequences would be far-reaching. A conviction could ruin his reputation permanently, leaving him unable to return to ministry or regain the trust of his followers. His once admired leadership would be seen through a different lens, and the public's perception of him would likely be irreversibly damaged. The emotional and psychological toll of a conviction, coupled with the public shame, could be devastating for Pastor Jeremiah. It's hard to imagine how he could continue his life and career in the same way if the allegations are proven true. Even if Pastor Jeremiah manages to avoid jail time or criminal charges, his career could be over. The scandal has already tainted his reputation, and it's hard to imagine how he could continue in his role as a trusted spiritual leader after everything that's come to light. Many of his followers might feel betrayed, and some could choose to distance themselves from him entirely. The trust that took years to build could be wiped away in an instant. It's also possible that his ministry could face financial struggles, with donors and sponsors pulling their support. Without the backing of his followers, the ministry could collapse, or at the very least suffer a significant decline in its reach and impact.